What up? Glad that's over.
The last game lived up to the much anticipated schlock that you might have thought it could be.
At least it didn't go to overtime.
Oh,
I have never rooted for an opposing kicker in the Superdome so hard as I did today for Eddie Pinheiro on that game-winning kick.
I really thought he was going to miss it, though.
I thought so, too. Funny thing is they iced him. Like, they're pretending that they wanted to win that game. They iced him. Like, get out of here.
Unreal. And, yeah, just when you thought they could pull it off. And you know what? Four in a row. Hell yeah, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? And
yeah, I do wonder if it would have been any different had there been meaning behind the game. I hope it would have been. Like, I genuinely hope that they would have tried harder, but I don't know. But yeah, so this is going to be the Inside Black and Gold. We're going to get started here in a second. So we're going to do the first. How we do these post game has been we do a long kind of rant session for the first segment, and then the second segment's going to be a mailbag. So if you get your comments, questions, whatever in the chat, I'm sure it's going to be 90% Fire Dennis Allen. We'll get to them in the back half of the show, but I encourage you to have more interesting takes than hashtag Fire Dennis Allen, because I don't know how many times we can talk about that subject. It's got to be boring for you, the listener, to hear me say the same thing over and over and over again. But every time it's like, oh, do this. Like, what are we going to talk about? Well, this is a mailbag, and all I can do is answer your questions. And if your questions are always the same, I can only answer them the same way. So maybe get creative. I don't know. Ask me what my favorite ice cream is, right? Like we could talk about anything. And I'd rather talk about anything than the Saints because they suck.
If I had to go number one, definitely cookies and cream.
So I guess the question is, like, what do we consider an ice cream flavor? Because it include like Ben and Jerry's? Because like that's so many different flavors in one.
I would say that's legit, though. I mean, if you had like that's the flavor it is, I can't help that it's got 10,000 things in it.
Yeah, so like fish food is my go-to for Ben and Jerry's, but I feel like that's almost different from any other type of ice cream, right? Like it's not like it's like, oh, I like Neapolitan ice cream. Oh, I like this ice cream because it has like little chocolate fishies and marshmallows in it. It's like a child.
The Tonight Dough, that one's pretty good.
It's a good one.
That one's
Americone
pretty badass.
Dream is good too. Yeah. So but my go-to like not ice cream, like little kid at an ice cream truck ice cream is what are they? The drumsticks.
Oh, with the nuts on top?
Yeah, I will mess around with a box of drumsticks like nobody's business.
Yeah, those are pretty badass for sure. And now you got like there's all different kinds of flavors on the drumstick end.
Yeah, I go original. I'm original all the way. Although I do prefer the chocolate ones to the vanilla ones.
They definitely have like the all chocolate dealio. They'll have like the caramel infused ones. I know them well. Trust me.
Anyway, all right. That's today's podcast. Thanks for listening. No. But yeah, so get your comments, questions in there, and we'll get to them in the second segment of this program. But we're going to get started here. And Steve, do you want to kind of lead us in?
It's a somber note. Yeah. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here on week 18's somber Inside Black and Gold podcast on an ending to a season that I guess in the end, Jeff, is kind of fitting for what we saw from this Saints squad this year. They built it up, and I feel like we all bought into that going out on a high, and then that kind of totally got sucked away in a game that I can't believe, we had to sit through.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm celebrating.
What?
This is a party for me. I am thrilled because I don't have to talk about this goddamn team anymore. They can't hurt me anymore. It's over.
Yeah, but now speculation city begins. Now you got to start.
I'm okay with that. Anything but this season. This season has been the worst.
Escape from reality.
But yeah, I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow us on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak, at Steve Geller WWL. This is going to be our last post-game podcast of the year, obviously, considering it is the last post game we are going to have of the 2022 season. So the schedule is going to be a little different. We're going to start publishing on Tuesdays and Thursdays again. It's going to be 2 episodes a week. So keep that in mind. If you haven't gone and subscribed, please do that wherever you get your podcast. We really do appreciate it. It means a lot. And it means even more if you go, you can leave us a rating, a review on Apple Podcasts, because those help us a lot in the algorithm. We want to show up in searches. And that's how you can help us do that. So long story short, that's my shtick. But yeah, this season needed to end, and I think, whether the players wanted to admit it or not, they wanted the season. Like once it stopped meaning anything in week 18, they were ready for this miserable season to end, just like everyone else was. And that's what you saw today. They had a scripted drive to start the game. It went 8 plays, touchdown. Chris Olave got over 1,000 yards. That was really the only thing that it seemed like anyone cared about. And that's what it was. And I thought Cam Jordan had a good take on how this game kind of felt just around this entire season at large.
Thoughts on how this game ended seemed to depict the Saints season entirely. Chances to score, we didn't. Chances to make a big play, a couple tackles missed. Ebbs and flows. Team never gives up, fighting. But when you let a team last till the end of the quarter, or end of the fourth quarter, and end up getting beat in the fourth, how many games have we seen that this year? There's like I said, it just seemed like the games we lost, this is exactly how it happened. You let somebody who shouldn't have been in the race stay in the race, and that's how you end up losing.
Yeah. It very much was. And I can't disagree with that. This game was the Saints season in a nutshell. It looked good for very short periods of time. You felt like the Saints were in control, and they never really were. And then at the end, they decide, you know what? This isn't what we want. We don't want to be a good team. We're going to be a bad team. And then they lose.
I was all excited. Alvin Kamara was looking great.
He was. Alvin played well. Alvin had his best game, I thought. Maybe
For
not
sure. It was
statistically,
he definitely looked like he had some of those moves back. You know what I mean?
Well, he was breaking tackles, right? He looked like
he was slippery,
Kamara
right?
ran like Alvin Kamara in this game. He ran 23 times, 107 yards, 4.7 yards a carry. And it was a legit 107 because it wasn't like he had one long run and then a bunch of small runs. Like his long run was 22 yards. So like he just kept ripping carries off. Like he's the only player that I look at and say he had a good game from on the offense, at least.
It's too bad we didn't throw him the ball at all.
Never do. He had 1 catch for 3 yards on 2 targets. Rashid, it very much felt like the offense had 15 scripted plays, which is what you do, right? You script the first 15 plays. That's what every team does. And it felt like very much that they did that and then nothing else. It did not seem like they had a plan. It didn't seem like the team understood what they were supposed to be doing. Chris Olave, I thought, looked very, I don't want to say aloof, but unfocused in this game. There was a point in the first half, if you remember that drive where it was the other drive that felt like, oh, this is a good football team. They got down into the Panthers territory. It was a long drive. And then for whatever reason, Chris Olave was standing over on the sidelines with his helmet in his hands. And that happened for, I want to say 6 consecutive plays. It was either 5 or 6 or 7 in that range. And there were multiple times, and I was watching him and I was tweeting about it because it was weird to me, in part because I had the over on Chris Olave yardage, which was 65. And he got to 60. So that's what I was self-interested at that point. I was like, why isn't he on the field? And it's the second week in a row I've been screwed over on a Chris Olave prop because last week I took his over on catches, which was 4.5. He had 4 catches on the opening drive, didn't catch another pass the entire game. So I don't know if they're just messing with me specifically, but it did look like he was, I don't know if he was getting punished or something. I thought maybe he had re-aggravated his hamstring and they were like, you know what, we're just going to shut you down. But that couldn't have been the case because he played like the entire second half. So I almost feel like he had messed something up and they were, he was in the doghouse or something because this was before the fumble. And he didn't come back on the field until the final drive after they got the interception and they were trying to get into field goal range. So then there were multiple instances where I looked down and I saw him kind of jogging out in the field. And I was like, oh, he's back in the game. And then I looked out and he wasn't in the personnel and I went back and I was like, oh, he's back on the sideline. So again, I don't know what happened there, but he did not look focused in this game. He had several drops.
Right.
He had the fumble. You know, he had 12 targets. He only had 5 catches. There were multiple instances where he was running one route and Andy Dalton was throwing another down the field. It didn't look right. So I do wonder,
it's like, what happened after the touchdown? He made
Yeah.
that great spin,
looked great.
and
Looked
then
great.
like suddenly, like he like shook everything and couldn't hold on to the ball.
Yeah, I don't know. It was not a good game for him.
It was really weird, but just to see all of a sudden, I don't know. He's had some issues this year with ball security and a few drops, but this game was like pile it on. You know what I mean?
I do wonder if there's kind of a rookie wall thing going on. You know, that's always an issue for rookies is you go into an NFL season and suddenly you're playing 17 games and it's every week and it's a grind. And especially you get to the end of the season and now this game doesn't really matter for the playoffs. And it's like, okay, I'm just unfocused. Like you have to be really focused to play in the NFL. And I don't think people appreciate that from an outside perspective. It's like you can lose that edge very easily. And when you do, you don't, you're Kenny Galladay, right? Like you need every ounce of focus to perform well in an NFL game. You don't do it by accident. And I just felt like he was very unfocused today. I felt like the entire offense, especially in the second half, was very unfocused. You know, like you can say they had chances in the
Alvin.
and they did. In the second half, the only chances they had were created by, the interception by Daniel Sorensen, like these instances where the defense set up the offense and they still couldn't perform. And that's what I think that's the story of this game.
We laughed last time that he got that takeaway, but man, Sorensen is Mr. I'm in the right place at the right time.
Yeah. If you want to look at it this way, 5 of the Saints' 7 interceptions this year came from the tandem that I refer to as the ex-Chiefs.
Right.
Because Tyrann Mathieu and Daniel Sorensen, who both played for the Chiefs last year, they had 5 of the Saints' 7 interceptions.
5.
The other 2 were Marshawn Lattimore and Demario Davis.
Tyrann's got 3?
Yes. And I'm not going to toot my own horn or anything, but I also am, because I think that people over the last few weeks have started to appreciate that Tyrann Mathieu is actually playing well. And like, I get it. He started slow, but he has been very good over the final 2 months of this season. And you know who set a career high in tackles today?
Dun, 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 who?
Tyrann Mathieu. He finished the season with 90 tackles. That's the most he has had in his career. And like for a guy who had was roundly criticized for not being a good tackler and for missing all these tackles, he set a career high in tackles. One thing, and Tyrann was asked like when he started feeling comfortable, and I thought he was very honest in his answer after the game.
It's probably fair to say, maybe midway, through the season. Took a lot of punches, early on in the year, but I've been doing this a long time. So, you just keep coming to work, keep trying to get better, and just, stick with your teammates through it all. So, I felt like I did that for the most part, and, felt like I finished the season, fairly strong.
Fairly strong.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was telling. I thought the fact that he was willing to admit, like, yeah, I didn't really feel comfortable in this offense until about halfway through. I do think you saw that, right? Like, I think he played very well over the last couple months of the season, and it coincided with this defense really stepping up in class. And they did finish the season without allowing a 20-point opponent after week 9. So
that's ridiculous. When you look at the numbers, forget the run that you're talking about right there, but just in this game alone of what Carolina couldn't do and somehow swept you this season with ineptitude everywhere. That's some disgusting football and back-to-back matchups.
Yeah, so the like we can talk all we want about that stat, right? The like points without allowing or games without allowing 20 points or more. The problem is they lost 4 of them.
You go 4-4.
Like, great. You haven't allowed anyone to score 20 points, but you didn't score 20 points either in a majority of them. So yeah, it's and people are going to say fire DA, whatever. I think that, like, I'm concerned about the kicking game. I'm concerned about the offense. Like, those are two things that you knew going into this season were going to have to be handled independently of the head coach, because he is a defensive guy, and you needed to trust and deputize people to take care of those elements of the game. It's the same reason that you needed a strong defensive coordinator with Sean Payton, and it didn't happen. If Will Lutz makes a field goal in this game, you win it. Straight up. Because you don't even try the 55-yarder if you are up 10-7. You just punt it knowing that Sam Darnold at that point had 14 yards passing. And you say, you know what, Sam, if you can quadruple your passing yardage in the final 2 minutes of this game, good on you. But they couldn't trust Will Lutz to make a field goal, and that's what cost you that game.
Can you imagine if Foreman hadn't gotten tossed and then they had more of a rushing attack?
Well, we're gonna pretend that his half sack this season, this whole season, was that they were really missing that much.
No, I'm saying for Carolina's run game, I'm saying they didn't even have Foreman available.
I mean, they scored 10 points in this game. Like, I'm not going to put it on Marcus Davenport getting ejected. I'm going to put it on your kicker not being able to make kicks and your offense not being able to execute on short fields and turnovers. And
somehow Darnold managed to have a worse performance than Baker Mayfield, and yet they both got victories.
Oh yeah, both Panthers quarterbacks had terrible games against the Saints.
Unbelievable. Like putrid.
He finished 5 for 15 for 43 yards passing with no touchdowns and 2 interceptions. 21 of those yards came on one pass play to set up the game-winning field goal.
Ugh.
He had 22 passing yards going into the final drive of the game. He had more rushing yards. He had 32 rushing yards, and that's one thing I tweeted during the game is I always forget that Sam Darnold isn't that slow. And I think the Saints did too, because he ran for a significant number of yards in this game.
He was Mr. Elusive. I couldn't believe how many times he wriggled his way out of trouble, especially on third down, of course. And you see him scrambling, picking up that yardage, and it just that happened, obviously a couple times. But man, you just really have to question how things are going with the offense. I don't really blame it on the O-line, even though they were lacking. They were lacking a lot of guys up front, obviously, in this game. But I didn't think that was the reason. I thought it was more of either the execution or the call.
Yeah, I mean, all season long, I felt like this offense was like working at half speed, and like the creativity wasn't there, and like you didn't take advantage of situations. And the example that comes to mind is it was a 3rd and I want to say like 6 in the fourth quarter, and you ended up with Josh Norman one-on-one over Chris Olave, and he had to be one-on-one because he's the X. So there's no one else over on that side. There's just a deep safety and Josh Norman. So he is on an island. And instead, the play call was a quick slant to the opposite side of the field to Rashid Shaheed, and Dalton left it behind Rashid, and it was a fumble. I'm sorry, and it was an incompletion, 4th down, a punt. And it's like, you need, like, as an offense, your goal should be to isolate and take advantage of matchups. And Josh Norman, in the year of our Lord 2023, is not a guy who you should ever let off the hook when he's one-on-one on your best receiver. And like, I don't get it. Like, why? How is that not a read? How is that not a check? How is that not a key you have going into the game, knowing that Josh Norman is going to be out on the outside against one of your fast receivers, and you never challenged him? You did on the first drive of the game, and you scored a touchdown. and you never did it again. Did you see one instance in that game where they attacked Josh Norman?
No, there was, and no, and the other thing that stands out to me was obviously the miss on not seeing Taysom wide open for a touchdown.
That was bad too. Yeah.
And I mean,
that was prior to this field goal.
There was just so many moments that you couldn't believe. It felt like it should have been like 21-0 kind of game, and you looked up and it was 7-0 for the longest. Obviously,
it felt like a team that wasn't ready to play. And whether that's true or not, I think that like if you go back and watch that game, you're going to feel that way. I don't know if it had to do with the like I don't want to put it on any situations, but I do think they probably got a later start to the week because of the whole DeMar Hamlin situation. There was a lot of distractions.
Carolina lost 2 O-linemen in that game, though.
Yes. Well, I mean, the issue wasn't on the defensive side of the ball. The defense, short of scoring a touchdown, the defense did everything it possibly could.
It really did. And it was so on the encouraging note of seeing all of a sudden those takeaways started coming in bunches, like everyone, starts talking about, and it just boom, it's the finito. They're done. We don't get to see more of that, at least. I thought has been a huge positive, obviously.
Yeah, it's the second consecutive season. I'm disappointed that I don't get to see what this defense could have done in the playoffs. Because last year I felt the same way. It's like you could win a game with this defense if you did it the right way. And you just don't get to see that. But yeah, and that's why like you hear Cam talking. Cam, yeah, it's like you actually believe what he's saying in terms of like, yeah, I'm pissed off because the defense, you say like the Saints came into this maybe not ready to play. That's on the offensive side of the ball. That's not true on the defensive side of the ball. The defensive side, they played their hearts out in this game. And here's what Cam had to say about how, you enter the offseason and how you're going to approach that. Hold on, let me find it.
Into the offseason, let this loss burn. There's nothing to be proud of going 7-10. Not making the playoffs for the second time in a row. Let it burn. Let it stay in your mind. Let it simmer. Let it carry over into your workouts. Let it carry over into whatever you got to do to get your mind right. Take some time, heal your body, and at the same time, let it be not even at the back of your mind. Let it be at the front of your mind. We have to be able to come in and take command from jump. You think about the entire season, what happens. I think defense made some plays, but if there's plays to be made, we can always make more. I think that, early on this first half of the season, we didn't have enough turnovers. I think early on, whatever it was, we were working on some things. Second half of the season, you saw a completely different energy around the team, and that's the energy you need from jump. Not to finish the way we wanted, it's going to be irksome for a while.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with that because, I was all bought in. I thought 4 in a row, man, this team was really gelling. And I was like, unfortunately, too little, too late. But hell, they'll still go out on a high into the offseason abyss of no playoffs. But not even any we don't get joy from that. It just the play calling on offense. I don't know if it didn't suit the person. I still can't believe we didn't go deep to Shaheed more. At least there's not the one shot to him even.
No, the offense just looked like it didn't have a plan. And that's what happens when you don't have a plan.
I got excited for a second. I saw Jameis Winston all of a sudden walking from the bench area. And I'm like, is he coming to warm up to give me a toss downfield? And for some reason, no, he went to the locker room, but he came back. I don't know if he just had to take, bathroom break or something.
I would guess it was a bathroom break.
But unfortunately, he wasn't warming up the arm. I didn't get to see him come in relief of Taysom and Dalton out there.
The funny thing is you look at Andy's numbers and they're not that bad. 15 for 25, 171 yards and a touchdown. It's like a 93.9 passer rating. But you watch the game and you're like, no, this was his game wasn't that good.
It's hard for me to be critical of Andy after I think of the atrocious drops that unfortunately Olave had.
Yeah, but I mean, Andy had misses too. Like Andy didn't play well.
Andy's luckily he didn't have like 2 or 3 more picks.
Yeah, Andy did not have a good game. So there's one thing that really annoys me on offense, and it's that Eno Benjamin got 2 carries for 3 yards. And I
Yeah.
just don't understand in a game where you're like clearly not putting your best foot forward. Why does Alvin have 23 rushing attempts and you don't even use Eno? Like you used David Johnson multiple times. He had 2 catches for 28 yards. But this guy who you just need to get a look at, you didn't get a look at him. Like, why? Why is that? I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. You did get Trevor Penning in at left tackle, and I thought that he had a decent game. I have to go through the tape to kind of get an idea of how he held up in pass protection. I think as the game wore on, he got beat a few more times. I think he started well, and he's always going to be a good run blocker. But I think he got hurt late in the game and had to get replaced by James Hurst, who started at guard and shifted outside, unless I'm mistaken. It was hard for me to pay attention late in the game because it was just so miserable. But yeah,
No, Penning did walk off on his own power deal. He didn't need the cart to take him to the back, but definitely had the cleat off, walking to the back with a ginger steps, not putting too much pressure, but wasn't in, like I said, the over amount of damage, considering that he was able to walk off on his own. Nobody was even got the shoulder help, leaning on him, helping him walk in. He just kind of hobbled off on his own.
yeah, and hopefully it's nothing serious. I mean, obviously you're heading to the offseason, so any kind of maintenance issue, you have plenty of time to deal with it. So that's what you hope. And even if he could have come back in the game, you don't come back into that kind of game. If it's something that you could injure worse. But either way, you got some really valuable tape on Trevor as a starting left tackle, and you can go into the offseason and kind of get a better idea of what you are looking at there. You also got some tape on Hurst at left guard, which who knows with Andrews Pete, is always hurt, and you kind of just need a backup option there. So if he's a better option than maybe a Lewis Kidd or a Calvin Throckmorton, all the better. You want depth at that position, and you want depth at a position where you can have a dual backup, right? Like he could obviously step in at any point and play left tackle, play guard. So that's something that's helpful. And so hopefully, you can look at that and kind of move forward with both those guys, because you really are hoping that to start next season, Trevor Penning is your starting left tackle.
Yeah, that's a big one that it obviously still remains to be seen. I think we've seen enough from like Alontae Taylor to know that what you have in him going forward. But there's still obviously, with Penning missing so much time, we didn't get to see him really develop much throughout the season at all. I think that hopefully, yeah, it's nothing serious with another foot injury for him, because
yeah, that's what you worry about. You worry about him maybe re-injuring that toe, that surgically repaired toe. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say that might be what it is, but that's what you would be worried about if he just sprained something, or
right.
Was dealing with just something that you need to give some time. You got plenty of time, right? Like that's one of the benefits, if you want to say, of missing the postseason, is you get the extra couple of weeks of the off season. And you can get as healthy as humanly possible, right? So if you want to look at the silver lining, it is extra rest for guys.
No, and I was going to say, with no love for Eno, but you had Taysom and Kamara rolling, though, quote unquote rolling.
Yeah. I mean, Kamara had a good game, but again, I didn't need. I know Kamara is,
except we don't
a good football player, right? I don't need to see Alvin in a game that doesn't matter. Like that's not information that I need. But
why do we not want to get Alvin in the end zone?
Well, I think they did want to get Alvin in the end zone, but they didn't get into situations where he could get into the end zone, right? Like, they weren't. I don't know if they ran a play in the red zone today. That's actually a good question. Did they? Because They fumbled outside the red zone. They had a turnover on downs outside the red zone. They scored a touchdown from outside the red zone. They missed a field goal from outside the red zone. I don't think they got into the red zone today once.
That doesn't sound right, though.
But when did they get into the red zone? They scored one touchdown, and it was a 25-yard touchdown. And that's the only time they scored. They fumbled from outside the red zone on Chris Olave's fumble. They missed a 44-yard field goal, which is outside the red zone. And they missed the 55-yard field goal, which is also outside the red zone. So I don't think they got into the red zone today.
Ugh. No, it's not like Carolina was there all day either. So
no, they got there once. Actually, they might have got there twice because Tyron got an interception like on the goal line. So I don't know where that was thrown from. But they did run the ball well. And that's something that you're going to go into the offseason and saying, so we have established that this is a defense that can shut down the passing game and do it as well as anybody, but they're susceptible to the run, especially power run inside. Chuba Hubbard had 21 carries for 69 yards and a long of 8. Deontay Foreman, 12 carries for 68 yards and a long of 21. So that's the type of run game that I think you have to find a way to stop. And when you're going into the draft and you're looking at prospects, I think defensive tackle is a position that you really need to take a long, hard look at because, I think Malcolm Roach is a good player. I think he's a backup in the NFL. David Onyemata is a good player. I don't know if he's a star, and I think you need more depth there.
What are we missing? Because what a drastic change though this year. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think who's not around from last season that made such a difference.
I don't think the run defense was that good last year either. Like I went into this season saying defensive tackle, interior defensive line is a position that they need to upgrade, and they didn't. And I think you're just seeing more and more. I think David Onyemata is, I don't know, maybe he's peaked, right? Maybe he's on the downs. Maybe he's on the second half of his career, and we saw the peak David Onyemata, and he's not going to be that guy anymore.
Although a pretty good game today, I'll say. I think
he's been fine. I think he's had a decent season. I just don't think that he has been a star, right? Like, you look at Vita Vea and you see like, okay, this guy's going to just single-handedly change a game. You look at like guys like Aaron Donald, Chris Jones and the Chiefs. These are guys who can change a game, and I don't think the Saints have that, right? I think Shai Tuttle had a solid season. Again, I think these are rotational defensive tackles, Kentavious Street, and they're playing in bigger roles than you should have them playing in. And I think that's why you're having a harder time stopping the run. Plus, teams are forced to run the ball. That's the other thing is when you are a dominant secondary, teams are going to just they're not going to take for granted that they can just throw it and not have to worry about it. They're like, okay, Sam is 2 of 12 for 12 yards. I guess we should try to run it, and that's what they did, right? So that's what the Falcons did. They threw for. When's the last time you saw the Saints hold an opposing offense to under 100 yards passing twice in a season? I don't know if it's ever happened, right? And so that's something you have to factor in is teams are going to stay absurdly dedicated to running the ball because they don't think they can throw it, and so it's going to expose deficiencies if you have them, and I think that's what's happened.
Seeing what the defense has done of late, you got to wonder though. Can that sustain obviously into next season? Who's going to be still around? Who's going to get paid? And for all the complaints you want to talk about Dennis Allen, obviously he's the main hand in that defense.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk about Dennis Allen in the mailbag.
I was going to say he's the main guy. He's the main the head in charge of that D. And look at the way it closed out the season. And I think it's easy, obviously, to look at the offense, obviously, where the deficiencies were. And to me, it's like, I was kind of joking. Why does the team hate getting Alvin Kamara in the end zone? But how does that happen this season? I mean, is it something where he wasn't completely him on the field yet? Or was it the offense holding him kind of back? Is it the court case kind of looming over him, which I don't feel like that was the case at all?
No, I don't think so.
It was just for him to be such an elite player in the league and what he can do. It's unfathomable to me that he wasn't in the end zone more. And I don't even
Yeah,
have
no,
him
I
in
mean, I don't
I
think
don't
there's any
even have him in
question.
fantasy football.
I don't think there's any question that Alvin has been misused in this offense. I don't, it's like we're gonna get into this in the mailbag, so we don't have to get into it here. But I think it's like, no, I don't want to get into it here, because there's a lot to be said, and we're already 30 minutes in, and yeah, I mean, from the perspective of having all of these weapons and me not feeling like any of them have been used in their ceiling, like what at the peak of what you could have expected. That's frustrating, and that's where I think you're gonna look in this offseason and you're gonna be like, okay, where do we make changes? And that's where you're gonna go.
Where you said not using weapons, it just flew into my head something. Where the hell was Jawan Johnson all game?
He had one catch for 21 yards. Adam Troutman had one catch for 18 yards. Traquan Smith had one catch for 6 yards. David Johnson, 2 catches, 28. Rashid Shaheed, 3 catches on 4 targets, 34 yards. Chris Olave, 5 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, I mean, but like you can say, where was he? Like, where was everybody?
Sure, right.
The offense didn't do anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, he's just one of those guys I feel like can be utilized more. Obviously, the Saints are so damn talented on that side of the ball too. And I'm not saying I think Andy Dalton is a good enough game manager to get it done, which doesn't make sense to me when you have
Yeah.
all that flanked out around him.
I mean, I don't think you can go and pull anything out of this game and say like, okay, this is a fundamental issue with this team, because this wasn't a football game. This was a preseason game with more pomp and circumstance and a better halftime show. I thought Rob Bass was great.
I was going to grab a sandwich.
He didn't hit. I had a good time. It takes two to make a thing go right. It takes two to make it out of sight.
It takes 2 to score a touchdown. Apparently.
Takes more than 2, apparently, because it hasn't been enough. All right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back with the mailbag. This is Inside Black and Gold. Hit the subscribe button. We have about 50 or so comments in there, so it's going to take a couple minutes to kind of collect them. Keep dropping them in, and we'll get through as many as we can. Thanks everyone for being here and for sticking around. Just going to go to a quick break, and then we will come back with your questions. All right. Finished right under the bell. Guess what? There's a lot of angry DA comments. Crazy. Who could have seen that coming?
I like one that was saying that we need Rob Bass for offensive coordinator.
Saw that. I was just about to say, I'm glad I wasn't the only one that appreciated Rob Bass. I thought that was a pretty solid halftime show for a game that no one cared about.
Good get Superdome.
I actually thought, and okay, let's get into the podcast here. Welcome back. We're back. Wait. And we're back here on Inside Black and Gold. We're going to get through the mailbag, but first, I want to get into this topic that we started on. Rob Bass was very good, and I thought it was a very good halftime show for a game that no one cared about. And the other note I have was that building was way louder than it deserved to be for the game that we watched. Like, I was amazed at how loud it got on that final drive. And it's like the Saints have such good fans. Like, they really do. And like, the fact that there was anyone there at all is so telling of like how much people want this team to be good. Like, they care so much that they I don't know any stadium, but probably half the stadiums in the NFL, there would have been more road fans than home fans, and they wouldn't have made any noise on that final drive. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I was kind of impressed. The lower bowl I think the lower bowl was pretty much totally filled, and there were splotches on the middle and upper level kind of thing. But whoever did show up was definitely, like you said, raring to go on that the end. And I don't know, the dome, no matter what, is usually magic. And unfortunately, there wasn't that good voodoo on this team this game.
Yeah, it didn't go well, and the fans deserve better, right? Like that's something that I think we can say for a lot of this season. The fans deserve better, and I'm going to get into this now. I didn't want to get into the last segment because I feel like we need more time, and I don't want it to be an hour-long segment. But like, I think there do need to be changes on this staff, but like, I don't think that every issue with the team just reflexively saying, "Oh, Dennis Allen sucks. Fire Dennis Allen." Like, I don't think that's solving any problems. Like, there are issues that need to be solved, but pretending that your kicker not being able to make a field goal is the head coach's problem is like something that he could have done differently to make Will Lutz kick the ball straight. That's missing the forest for the trees, in that you have a Will Lutz problem. Like, is Will Lutz the kicker that you can depend on going forward? I don't know, but like, that's the question. You look at Darren Rizzi, right? You look at like that part of the staff. When the offense is struggling the way it has, it's like, okay, are you going to look at the defensive head coach, or are you going to say, okay, we need to pull some strings at the offensive coordinator position and make changes? And that's what David Weil says. He says the offense need help this offseason, need a QB and offensive coordinator stat. And it's like, yes. Like, do you see a defense that held the opposing quarterback to 43 yards passing and did not get any complimentary football played by the offense? Because that's what I saw, and that's the guy I'm looking at. You could clean house every year that things don't go well, but that's not how you create a winning football team. And I don't know.
No, and I just don't think that Dennis Allen is not somebody that the organization isn't fully committed to. You know what I mean?
Oh, they are committed to him, right?
Right, and it just doesn't. He is going to have to make some tough decisions, though, like you said, and I think that starts obviously on the offense, because that's not Saints football when you can't get your one of the top weapons in the NFL into the freaking end zone. And it just is a question of, I guess, is it really on Andy Dalton too, as much as everybody wants to put it on quarterback? And at times I understand he has his deficiencies, obviously, but there were some. He's a guy, that when it does get tough, he's not going to fold on you.
Yeah, to me, it's like, it's not a question of whether Andy Dalton can play quarterback at a level that's high enough to win games. Like, we've seen,
he got banged up in that game.
I'm sorry?
He got banged up in that game. He was hurting.
Yeah. I rode an elevator with him. He seemed fine.
Nothing was wrapped.
No. He and his, this is kind of funny. When we were leaving the Superdome, I was waiting for the elevator in the press box, and it comes up and it opens, and I wasn't expecting anyone to be in there. And that's always weird when there's people in the elevator, like, because you press the button and you're at the top floor and you're like, there's not going to be anyone in here because they would have already gotten off. Why would they come up to go down? Well, the elevator doors open and there's people in there, and those people are Andy Dalton and the guy I can only assume is Andy Dalton's dad because they look exactly like each other. And so it's like, oh, okay. And so we rode the elevator down, and they're talking about like the playoff scenarios for how like the 49ers could get in the playoffs. It was very funny to me. But he seemed fine. Anyway, I think that when you talk about the quarterback position, you want dynamic quarterback play, and everyone wants dynamic quarterback play. And what you need to have is league average quarterback play. And that's what you have with Andy. Now, are you a Super Bowl contender with league average quarterback play? Probably not, right?
So,
you kind of feels like you need, unless you were the 49ers and your team, independent of the quarterback, is dynamic at every position, and you do just need a game manager. But, you know, you look around the NFL, and the teams that you feel like have a chance to win a Super Bowl are the Bengals and the Bills and the Chiefs, you know, and the Eagles, and these teams with a quarterback who is elevating the offense, not just managing it. And so that's where I see it. But I did think that DA was pretty open on this question after the game. And so we can listen to that here.
Probably a better time for us to answer that question in terms of what we need going forward, you know, in the offseason. But, you know, Mickey and I will sit down, you know, this next week. We'll talk about a lot of different things. We'll evaluate our program from top to bottom, and then we'll make whatever adjustments we need to make, and then we'll have a plan moving forward.
Dennis, would you expect that this offseason there are going to be more roster changes, more personnel changes than maybe this team has experienced in the last 5 years? Or so?
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, look, certainly when you know, we've got these magnets up on our board that have our depth chart, and you know, a red magnet means that he's an unrestricted free agent, and certainly there's a lot of those red magnets up there. So, you know, look, we know in the business of pro football, there's always change. So there'll be change, you know. To what extent, I think, you know, those are decisions that we're going to have to come up with over the next week or two.
You were talking about roster changes, but what about potential coaching changes after you largely kept?
Yeah, I think again, like I just said, we're going to evaluate everything, and so nobody's making any decisions on anything 30 minutes after we walked off the field. You know, so there'll be time to evaluate those things, and we'll see what we need to do to give ourselves the best opportunity as we go forward.
You see, Mike Gundy, you can't answer that question without being an asshole. I don't even think anyone's going to get that reference, but Mike Gundy was a jerk to a reporter who asked him if there was going to be staff changes. And he was like, how dare you ask me that question? Anyway, but no, like, I think that's, you know, he's not saying there's going to be changes, but I think, you know, not deflecting that is pretty telling of, like, you know, he could say, like, I don't want to talk about it right now, or blah, blah, blah. He's basically admitting that, yeah, there's a good chance that there's going to be some changes. Now, where they are, you don't know, but you don't watch this team operate the way it did and not feel like from the front office down, you need to significantly study and make decisions on how you're operating. And I think it has to start on the offensive side of the ball, and it has to start with Pete Carmichael. And I think like, I really do like Pete. I enjoy him as a person. I think he's a really good football mind. I don't think that he is suited to be the commander of an offense. Like, I think he's a decent offensive coordinator when you have a Sean Payton leading the show. I do not think that he is the kind of, you know, standard holder for a dynamic offense in the 2023 version of the NFL. And so you need to find a way to modernize, or at least, you know, bring in someone with more cachet, and that can be more creative and give you an identity on offense. And that's kind of where I see this team really needing to make changes. And that's the thing. If you clean house, you can't just fix the problems you have. You have to start from scratch. Whereas if you just fix the issues and can find a way to make it a more well-oiled machine, then you can build on things. And 7-10 is a record you can build on. That's my take, but I know people disagree.
7-10 sounds a bit gross, though.
Oh, I agree, but it's not like 2-14.
No, but at least you knew, like, it. The mediocre, 7-10 is still mediocre. Those are the seasons that are harder to stomach, I think, just because you almost see a product that's there, and then it just for whatever reason, the growth, or because you want to say growing pains, or because of injuries, just things don't end up going your way. So it was like that season that could have been but wasn't, almost.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. But on the flip side of that,
I'd rather
right,
be two,
well, like you could have been 2-14, but you also could have been blown out in game after game after game and not felt like you were a competitive team. The reason this is frustrating is because it feels like the Saints should be winning games and they didn't win enough of them, and they were close enough in so many of them that they should have won them. And
not against the Panthers. Can't beat the Panthers.
Well, right, exactly. Like the Panthers games were kind of notwithstanding, and I think week 3 was tough because Jameis was trying to play through significant back and foot injuries, and so you didn't get a real look at what the offense should have looked like with him healthy. This game, I just don't think you can take anything away from it because it was just a garbage football game.
And that game in Carolina,
I don't know, like the Panthers games are tough.
Thomas and Landry got banged up in that game in Carolina too.
Yeah, so you didn't have any receivers, and your quarterback was playing through injuries he should never have been asked to play through. And so but like I think that's why I look at it like, like I think there are levers you can pull that can make you a more representative NFL kind of team that should be in the playoffs, and you didn't get enough of them right this year in the first year of a new head coaching tenure where there were a lot of questions and you had to make educated guesses in terms of, okay, maybe we can just maintain the continuity on offense and Pete Carmichael can take over and do things in a way that, you don't miss Sean Payton. But I think we learned throughout the course of the season that that's not true. And that's not the fault of anyone other than, you have to correct that mistake. Yeah, and so that's what you do. But
the huge issue that definitely comes down to back to Carmichael for me is the fact that you've got the horses around you. You've got the talent to work with when you have, the quarterback situation, I'm not going to say isn't ideal kind of thing, but when you have a weapon like Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Juwan Johnson, Taysom Hill, Alvin Kamara, especially a guy like Alvin Kamara, I'm just thinking that this offense should be obviously able to put up more than freaking 7 points in a game.
Yeah, you got to be better. And like, we don't have to go any...
Even besides, like, picking on Lutz for not making his kicks, we got to get in the end zone.
Yeah, and you also have to make your kicks. But yes, you have to get into the end zone. And we don't have to go any deeper on that. Like, that's my piece on it. I think you need to replace the offensive coordinator. And, I don't know, Ronald Curry is an interesting guy. He's a quarterback's coach. I think he did a pretty good job this season. Cody Burns, I think, has done a really good job with the wide receivers. The offensive line is tougher to gauge because you didn't really see much from Trevor Penning, so you don't know how well Doug Marrone has been leading that group, but you did see a serious jump forward for Cesar Ruiz, and they've all been singing Doug Marrone's praises. And so, you kind of feel like you're doing okay there. Zach Strief, I think, has done a good job. So I don't think you need to replace the entire offensive staff, but I do think you need an identity at the top, and you don't have it right now. And so
don't you think, though, Ramczyk had a pretty down year?
He did, and you have to wonder if he is falling off a little bit.
Right.
He's been dealing with injuries, and they've been piling up. And anytime you're dealing with repetitive knee issues, you start to worry. And so maybe that is a position where you have to start thinking about, okay, who's our right tackle of the future? But he's still playing competent NFL football, so I don't think that's an emergency position.
No, but he wasn't the same obvious all-pro Ramczyk you're used to.
No, he wasn't. But yeah, you gotta figure that out. Rubber Johnny here, in his last post-game presser of the season, when asked about what went wrong, DA literally said, "We're going to look at the tape." Unreal. I mean, what do you think he's gonna say? How do you think they figure? Like, that is a very fan thing to be like, I watched this game in real speed, and the announcers told me this, and so this is my take, and this is what it's going to be. I don't need to watch it again. I don't need to slow this down. I don't need to study it at all. I know it. It's true. It's a fact. But that's not how teams operate. Like, when you send a coach up there and you ask him about a specific player in a game, he doesn't know what, like, he just watched 200 plays of a football game, or however many plays there are in a football game. Like, he's not ready to be like, yeah, Chris Olave ran the wrong route on 3rd and 3 in this with 15 minutes or with 7 minutes and 55 seconds left in the third quarter. Like, no, he's going to watch it on film and he's going to make an assessment. And so, like, that's not an unreasonable thing for a coach to say. And any coach who goes up there and trashes his players without watching it again, that's a bad coach. That's a coach the players don't want to play for.
After watching it again, he's not going to throw him under the bus again, even the next day. Like tomorrow or Monday, Allen's not going to say, oh, yeah, Olave, his hands really were a disappointment for us when we needed him most.
Well, not in a press conference, but he might say that to Chris in person, right? Like, that might be in the team meeting, and he'd be like, hey, Chris, you let us down here. Like, you're going to have an exit interview, and you're going to be bringing these things up. And I think what he said about Chris Olave was interesting too, because I thought it was I thought DA, I've been critical of him in press conferences. I don't think he handles himself very well in terms of he's just kind of very robotic, and you kind of want to see a little more emotion out of him. Like,
they're kind of awkward though, so I get it but yeah, obviously he has to deal with it.
But I did think he was actually a little more open in this press conference, and here's what he said about Chris Olave.
Yeah, he's been the same guy each and every week. He's highly talented. He's got a lot of things that he's got to continue to work on to get better at. I think there's a lot of growth left in that player, and we're expecting to see a lot of growth in that player. So certainly, good start, but not near where he can be. And I think he's got to have a good offseason so that we can take that next step to develop into the type of receiver that I think he really can be.
Yeah, first-round picks don't drop footballs like that.
No, but I mean, like, I think that's fair, right? Like, he did a lot of good things in his rookie season, but there are things to work on, especially ball control, ball security. But that's stuff you can work on, right? Like, until you get to the NFL and these coaches get to work with you, there's a lot of mystery. And then you get into your first offseason and you're kind of just working on everything. And then you play an entire season, and now you get to the end of it. Now you have your first NFL offseason, your first full NFL offseason with no combine and no pro days, and you were just a professional football player. And so you can look back and say, okay, these are the top three things that I need to focus on the most: ball security, route running, this and that, and
bulking up.
And then you work on that. And then you come in year two and you are a more well-rounded player. And that's the point that Chris Olave is at right now. We know what he does well. He needs to improve the things he doesn't do as well. And so I thought that's a fair point by DA, which is like, he's a really good receiver. He is not anywhere near where he needs to be a star receiver. And that's what you saw today. Like, you can't fumble the way he has fumbled this season. You can't have these letdowns in key instances where the ball hits you on the hands or in the helmet. And that's where you got to change it.
Well, like I said before, I couldn't believe it. It looked like we were primed to see a huge Olave breakout after the nice little spin into the end zone. Everyone was all excited to open the game, and then nothing but pain afterwards.
Yeah, so 504 Co and David Weil both kind of asked the same question. It says, is the restructure a clear sign that we are moving on from Mike Thomas? And so we didn't talk, this happened yesterday, so we didn't get a chance to talk about it in the pod. Effectively, what happened is the Saints reduced Mike Thomas's 2023 cap hit from $15 million to $1 million, or, there's more specific numbers, but that's basically where you're at. They also guaranteed a $900,000 signing bonus, which kind of just greased the skids to make it worth his while to sign this kind of restructured deal. And so, yeah, you're kind of pushing that cap hit forward, which means that it's the most likely thing that's going to happen is he's going to get cut. It's going to be very difficult to trade him, because why, as another team, would you take on such kind of a weird contract for a guy who hasn't played more than a couple snaps for 3 years, and you're questioning his health. And so you're going to want to bring him in on a more team-friendly deal. And so I think that's what you would want to do, but teams aren't going to trade for that contract when they know they can just wait until he gets released and then negotiate with him. So I think that's what's going to happen. It's very unlikely the team keeps him on the roster and accepts the cap hit that he would bring. So yeah, I think the way I put it this morning on First Take is this doesn't mean that they're definitely going to cut him, but if you were going to cut him, this is the step you would have to take first for that to be able to happen in a way that actually benefits you from a cap perspective.
Right. If you're following, the step-by-step here, it kind of seems that's where the direction is headed towards him, kind of getting released by the team, which is unfortunate because I know, one, fans are going to be angry, and they should, the fact that you're not going to get, obviously, any value for anything for a player like Michael Thomas, who is going to end up on a roster and have a totally healthy season, ball out, because the guy's skill level hasn't just vanished.
And I'd be happy for him, right? Like, I root for guys like that because that's frustrating because I want to see great football players play football. Like, I don't enjoy complaining about a guy. I want to see Mike Thomas out there healthy and balling out because I love watching Mike Thomas play. And
so
whether it happens in New Orleans or somewhere else. Yeah, and like I think that to an extent there has been a undue amount of emphasis placed on Mike for the last 2 years because he is your biggest investment in the wide receiver room and you need him out there. Now I think you're feeling a little better about where you are in that regard. And so you can say, okay, you know what? This something's got to give. We're going to move on. They made it. I think they did as good as they could to make it worth Mike's while. And so he's going to go and he's going to find a new deal somewhere. That's my guess. And, yeah, that'd be great if he had a healthy season. And then the Saints now can focus their time and energy and the coaching staff's time and energy on developing Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and whoever else they bring into that wide receiver room. I do think that they need to bring in a body receiver, like a bigger receiver, because that is one thing that you are now lacking, because I expect Jarvis Landry to be out of town, is that kind of possession receiver. But yeah.
Jarvis just couldn't, unfortunately, hold up either, but one of
those
guys
who's just unfortunately been dealing with injuries, right?
Yeah, but one of those guys that was definitely a solid voice in that locker room this year. Really enjoyed any time that we did get to talk to him.
Yeah. Here's Ricky B. The O-line was horrible this year in the middle of the defensive line. Yeah, it's the O-line's tough because you've been dealing with so many injuries, and that's always the case on the offensive line, right? Like, offensive linemen are injured more frequently than anyone else just because of the position they play. And, it's like not hard to understand why. Like, you watch all these replays where they're kind of blocking and they have no ability to avoid someone like rolling up on their ankle, or, it's like you see it happen all the time and you wonder how these guys aren't dealing with injuries every week. But that's why when the Saints, that's why I get annoyed when people complain when the Saints take offensive linemen in the draft. It's like, you need these guys. And then it's like, yeah, when it's bad, you can't do much. Like, I don't know how many people watched the Jaguars-Titans game last night or Saturday night. Like, the Jaguars won that game. They honestly should have lost it. Josh Dobbs lost that game for the Titans. And the reason that the Jags probably should have lost that game was because their offensive line couldn't block. I mean, the Titans were through every possession. Like, Trevor Lawrence, who has had a great season, had no time, right? And when the offensive line is not protecting the quarterback, it's really hard to win a game, right? Like, that's how the Giants beat the unbeatable Patriots in the Super Bowl, by having a pass rush that you couldn't stop. And so, like, that's why good teams build through the lines, and that's why the Saints are going to continue to do that. And so, if you're someone who complains about the offensive line, I really hope that you are not also someone that complains when the Saints draft Cesar Ruiz in the first round, because that's why you are bringing in guys like that.
Yeah, and you definitely need to continually invest in that O-line, obviously, for whoever's at quarterback, and obviously benefits the run games in so many ways. I was really surprised that I feel like we saw more of Traquan today than typical. Yeah.
You saw Marquez on a couple snaps. So you saw Marquez on the snaps when I mentioned Chris Olave was out of the game, right? Those were the snaps when you threw to Marquez, and he had you say Andy Dalton had a terrible game.
No,
and
that's why it's
kind of
hard
true.
Right.
He threw a perfect back shoulder fade to Marquez Callaway, who never saw it. He just didn't find it. And I think Marquez has had a really down year, which is disappointing. I think I think there's a few instances going on right now where these were Sean Payton guys and they're Sean Payton holdovers, and they might not fit in with the current regime quite as well.
But I will say, like, on the field though, Callaway is a very loose, animated, outgoing. You can see, lively personality out there. So it's like you would think that kind of fun player would translate to the field, but it really just hasn't.
Well, if his best play of the season came on the first Panthers game where he turned an interception into a touchdown.
Yeah.
If you remember, he kind of just reached up and grabbed it. And that's the type of play that, we haven't seen from him. And because I think he's just not on the field because I don't think he can create separation as well as he needs to. Here's the young blood of 46. Saints need to draft a young running back to pair with Kamara next season. Tyjae Spears of Tulane would fit the bill. I would love to see Tyjae Spears on the Saints. I would love to see them bring in a young running back. I've been saying this all season that it annoys the hell out of me and it's nothing against Mark Ingram. It just annoys me that you don't have a young running back kind of learning at the feet of a Mark Ingram, right? Like that should be what you're trying to do is have pipelines. I call them pipeline positions, right? Where you have a veteran who you want, there are players who could be good quality NFL players. They are not that because they need to learn, and they learn by studying what the good players do. And so when you have a Demario Davis, right, you're able to develop a Caden Ellis because he's able to learn from this guy. Whereas in other instances where you kind of just throw him into the wolves, he might not be able to do that. And so that's what I would love to have seen from the Saints when they had Mark Ingram. And then you bring in a young guy who can learn from Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. They didn't do that. Same thing they didn't do at quarterback. It's the same thing they didn't do with Malcolm Jenkins at safety. And that always bothers me because it feels like a wasted opportunity. And that's where Mark Ingram's going to retire. And I assume, right, he may come back. But I feel like he's right on the edge. And so you haven't had that guy. And now you have, Benjamin in there. Maybe he's a guy you keep around, but I don't know because you didn't play him. And so, I would like to see an infusion of youth at the running back position because like you saw two guys today, like Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, like these are guys who can get the job done and you just have to give them a chance. And that's just not something the Saints have done.
The Saints have typically been, I feel like, pretty good at grabbing undrafted, rookie talent. That didn't happen this year, unfortunately. I thought, we would have what's that?
What are you talking about? Yes, they did.
Where?
Rashid.
No, I meant at running back. Sorry.
Oh, running back. Like who?
Right. It didn't happen this year. But typically, I feel like they've hit some pretty good home runs with undrafted talent at running back. But weren't able to mine that this year.
Like Pierre Thomas. I think that's kind of what you're thinking of.
Yeah, like a Kyrie Robinson, Chris Ivory.
Yeah. But I mean, you haven't seen that in a while, right? Like they drafted Boston Scott in the 6th round and let him go.
He scored a touchdown today.
They let go.
Or Sunday.
Yeah. But like Abram Smith, I don't know, that was someone that we all were off on because we just assumed that they brought him in and he looked solid. I don't think he looked bad, but
is he in the XFL?
Didn't even make the practice squad.
I think he got drafted in the XFL, right?
I don't know. But he didn't even make the practice squad.
No. Whatever we were thinking about that did not pan out.
Yeah, something didn't compute there, which is really odd. Maybe he didn't pick up the offense. I don't know, but
he didn't obviously pick up anywhere else either. And anybody,
no, it's not like he got claimed or anything. Yeah, Don Tomasino, who was the running backs coach, that's Joel Thomas. Been around for a while. One note for Joel, and I think one of the reasons the Saints wanted to bring Eno in, Joel Thomas actually recruited Eno Benjamin out of high school. Joel was a coach at Arkansas, I believe, at that point, and he recruited Eno, so he knows Eno well, and so I think that's part of the reason the Saints wanted to bring him in. But yeah, Joel's been around for a while. He's very well liked. I would expect him to stick around.
It's official, Jeff. The Wikipedia page for Abram Smith says American football running back for the DC Defenders of the XFL. There you go.
Okay, well, good for him. Is he still playing?
We don't have an XFL team in New Orleans, huh? We do have the Breakers, though. I know that how you love them so.
They do not play in New Orleans.
Are they coming back this year, or are they still doing Alabama?
Why are you asking me?
I don't know. I
don't
figured
know.
you might know. You're the all-knowing. It's sad, though, that if they're not back yet.
Here's Pammy Whammy. Jeff, don't put lipstick on this pig. It's bad.
This
I don't
game
even
or
own
this
lipstick.
team?
Do people actually put lipstick on pigs? Does that help? Has anyone ever done that? Where it's like, oh man, that lipstick, that really helped that pig. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how that one of those.
I think that's
phrases
the
comes about,
phrase
right?
is like, you can't make a pig look pretty by putting lipstick on it. But I don't know. I've never seen a pig with lipstick on it. Maybe it is. I don't want to shame this pig before I have.
Pig's good. Porky Pig's girlfriend looked pretty good.
Yeah. Why are we so mean to pigs?
They're delicious.
I do love me a good pig. All right, let's get one more good question.
Kind of like a potato. You can make almost anything out of a pig.
Let's get one more good question in here, and then we'll go because we've been on here for like an hour.
The last question that just came in about Jameis, I think we know the assessment.
Well, here's one, Dwayne Harris, which there was a former return guy named Dwayne Harris who I enjoyed watching, but I don't think this is that guy. He's talking about the Dalton pass to Marquez. He's like, that's stretching it. It wasn't a perfect pass. I'm like, fine, it wasn't perfect, but it was a ball that could have been caught if Marquez had any idea where it was. And so that's when I say, like, perfect, fine. Nothing is perfect, but it could have been caught. And he just didn't know where it was. Don't put jewelry on a hog. We got that. Oh, you really want me to get into Jameis in the last question? I guess we could. Okay.
It might be the last time we talk about him ever.
Yeah. Can we get a fair assessment of the Jameis situation? This is Ransom Antoine. Yes, Antoine. I mean, I feel like I've been pretty consistent on my take on the Jameis situation, and it's that Dennis Allen did not want Jameis to be his quarterback.
No, I was going to say, I think it's pretty clear what the team's plan was for Jameis, obviously.
No, I don't know about that. I think this is a Dennis Allen thing, and I think the head coach has the right to decide who his quarterback is. So
wait a minute. And like so you don't think Pete's got anything to do with that, though, either?
Well, yeah. So when I say Dennis Allen, like, I'm just saying it's not the front office is kind of what I'm saying. Like, it's a Dennis Allen regime thing.
Sure. Yeah.
And I do think that, yes, Pete Carmichael was a factor in the sense that Dennis Allen felt more comfortable with Pete Carmichael and Andy Dalton, that combination, than he did with the Jameis Pete Carmichael combination. And part of that is fair because I don't think Pete Carmichael was cut out for the job. But from the Jameis side of things, it's a tough situation. And it's a bummer because I really wanted to see him kind of spread his wings in this offense and get a chance to be a starter. I don't know if he's going to get another chance. I don't know if there will be a market for him. I'd hope there is. I hope the Saints don't hold him hostage if they're not going to give him a chance to start games. And I don't think they're going to. So I expect that.
Do you think there's any chance they could get a low draft pick for him or nah?
No one's going to trade for him. I think that you're going to see. I'd like to see him get a chance to go sign somewhere else for a team that needs a quarterback and get a chance to play.
There's a bunch of those.
I'm sorry?
There's a bunch of teams that need quarterbacks.
Yeah. No, there's jobs out there, and
the position that is so important. There's not many really good ones in the league, which is crazy.
No, and the other thing that's interesting is I don't think that the Saints are going to be able to re-sign Andy for $3 million.
No, there's no way, right?
I mean, because he's been good enough, right? And that's the thing. It's like, I get it. I know people want to make this out to be like, there's some vitriol between the team and Jameis, and that's maybe there is, but like the bigger issue that kept Jameis off the field is Andy Dalton actually played pretty well. And
they might end up stuck with Winston under contract while Andy is getting paid somewhere else.
Well, right. Like, and I was talking to Bobby about this morning. And it's like you just remember, go back to Teddy Bridgewater, right? Like you like premium backup quarterbacks can get paid.
Sure.
And you look at like the Titans, right? Do you not think the Titans would have liked to have like an Andy Dalton back there to win that game? Because I think, Josh Dobbs played reasonably well, but he lost them that game, right? They missed the playoffs because their best option was Josh Dobbs and Malik Willis, who was terrible, actually worse. And so teams are going to be willing to pay. And so I think the Saints are going to have competition to re-sign Andy, even in a backup role. So that's something.
Swap with Chicago again and now get Trevor Siemian back.
Yeah. Do you think Chicago will give up Trevor? But yeah, it's tough. And I'd like to see Jameis come back, but I don't know how you reconcile that. I don't know how you would be like, yeah, we benched you last year and we didn't even bother to put you in when we were desperate. But do you want to start now? Do you trust us?
Do you want to come into training camp and compete?
Yeah, it's just not a good look. And I don't like how it's gone with him, and it's disappointing. And yeah, I don't know if there's much more to be said than that. I'm hoping that he gets a chance somewhere.
It's definitely strange for him. It's hard to put his performance, on the reason why Winston hasn't been successful, because of the fact that the guy just hasn't been able to stay healthy for whatever reason. I mean, last year and this year, that's another case where a pretty predominant piece to your offense now, along, like I'm saying, with a Michael Thomas, obviously, he was supposed to be your starting quarterback, and boom, the guy's, shelved immediately this season. A lot of things just did not begin right for this black and gold squad.
Yeah, it's suboptimal, right? Like, I don't like if Jameis never gets hurt, I don't think Andy ever gets in the game, right? And so that's the tough part, and that's why I think when you're Jameis, you tried to play through it because you had a feeling that this might happen, and you didn't want to give up that spot, and then you were assured that it wouldn't, and it did. And so that's tough, and I give Jameis all the credit in the world because you look at like Derek Carr, Marcus Mariota, that's how those situations can go. Like you can get bailed on. These players don't take it well and they move on. You like Ryan Tannehill before the season, he was like, I'm not here to mentor Malik Willis. Like Aaron Rodgers basically said, how dare you draft Jordan Love? Even though Aaron Rodgers was Jordan Love, like to Brett Favre.
Sure.
And so the fact that Jameis has handled it, and we've gotten to the end of the season and he's still, active in the locker room and he's still practicing and he's still serving. He's the backup quarterback, right? Like if Andy Dalton got hurt, he would be the guy going in. And so you have to give him credit for that. And I think he played reasonably well when he was healthy. That's the frustrating thing, is he just was healthy for such a minimal amount of time that he would have gotten a chance to start. Because and that's the thing, even later in the season, even when they went to Andy Dalton, Jameis was not 100%, right? Like you could have put him out there, but you would have been putting him out there at something less than 100% and dealing with the lingering injuries, mostly the foot as opposed to the back, because the foot was a bigger issue in terms of coming back. And so that's the point where the coaching staff decided we're more comfortable with this. And that's the point where he lost that job.
I can't wait to go into this offseason talking about who's going to be the quarterback, who are they drafting, are they going to bring in a free agent? There's so much uncertainty, obviously, still with that. I mean, there really isn't any free agent, to me at least, that kind of piques my interest, unless obviously in no way in hell is it going to happen is Lamar Jackson available.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like he's going to be. It sounds like, there's going to be an option. There's going to be the ability to go try and get him. So, maybe that is you saw that last year with Deshaun Watson. Like, this team is willing to try to clear the decks and go get a guy that's proven.
I just think they franchise him, tag him, huh?
Well, I think they will franchise him in order to trade him because they're not going to try to let him walk for nothing, but they also don't want to pay him. So I don't think that they're going to franchise him and have him play on the franchise tag because this trying to franchise a guy 2 years in a row is very difficult. It's very expensive, very fast. I think Kirk Cousins might be the only one I can think of that actually had it happen. And so like the Washington paid like $36 million for one season of Kirk Cousins, then he went to Minnesota anyway. But yeah, so that could happen. We'll see. Brian Russell wants to know how we feel about Max Duggan or Hendon Hooker. I think there's going to be options. It's just really difficult to find a quarterback that's starting caliber outside of the first round. He also wants to know if we're Saints fans or just Saints reporters, and if we like to see them succeed. I don't know what that means.
I definitely want to see him succeed.
Yeah. Do I seem like someone who doesn't care whether the Saints win or not? I care.
But you know what? What's odd, I will say for both of us for doing a Saints podcast, neither one of us grew up Saints fans, though.
No. But that's why I'm also not like ridiculously emotional about all
right.
this.
I think that's a
practical.
I think that is a good bonus to that.
But yeah. So, but no, I mean, I watch a hell of a lot more Saints games than any other football team. So let's put it that way. I can't be a great fan of other teams.
Plus, to me, you're around these guys. You see them in the locker room, whatever. Yeah. I'm not saying you have like a relationship, but you're still pulling for this team because it means happier times and much better spirits around too.
Agreed. All right, that's the end of that. I think we've gone through the mailbag about as deep as we can. There is one other question because I promised that if someone asked a question, we would talk about it.
Sean to Arizona.
David Weil wants to know pie or cake.
Ooh, I do love a good pudding pie, but I probably have to. I'd say I have more cake than pie.
Well, so I'm kind of confused on this one because I would say cheesecake, which is called cake, but I would think it's technically pie.
Yeah,
like a cheesecake isn't really a cake. It's a pie crust.
There is no cake involved with cheesecake, right?
And you make it in a pie crust. But it's called a cheesecake. So I don't know. I think that's technically a pie. So I think I would go pie because that's my go-to is like a good cheesecake. Anyway,
it's like driving on a freeway or whatever. I
have no idea what you're talking about.
You park on a driveway, but you drive on a parkway.
Yes, good job.
There you go. I got through it.
Yeah, we got there in the end. But all right, let's wrap this up. This is the final post-game edition of the Inside Black and Gold podcast for the 2022 season. I do appreciate everyone who's been in here, left a comment, sent me a message, chimed in, told me I'm dumb. I love it all. It's been a lot of fun, and so we're going to keep doing this throughout the offseason, but we're going to scale it back a little bit. As I mentioned, just episodes Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're going to have a lot of pre-recorded stuff, so you might have some evergreen topics throughout the offseason. But stick with us, and we'll come back for next year fully loaded. Yeah.
I can't believe it's over.
It's never really over, Steve.
Seeing an actual football game,
quote.
Football, an actual Saints football game, it's going to be a while.
One of the things about the Saints missing the playoffs that I appreciate is I actually get to watch the playoffs.
Instead of having to work them.
I can get to go to a bar and watch playoff football, which is really fun. And it's one of the things I miss about when I cover the games, because it's like that's one of the reasons I love football is because I can go just get drunk and yell. And so I'll be able to do that. So if you want to come down to Finn McCool's,
where you can find Jeff yelling and screaming.
Where you can find me drunkenly berating Daniel Jones for doing something dumb. Feel free to come hang out. And yeah, I'll be there. Trust me, I'll be there. All right. Peace, y'all. Say goodbye, Steve.
Bye, Steve.